The GMC Motorhome's self-contained water system pipes hot or cold water under pressure to the kitchen sink, bathroom basin, shower head, and toilet. Fresh water can be supplied from two sources: a 40-gallon supply tank which is filled through its own filler, or through a direct hose connection to a city water system. When connected to city water, the water pump functions as a check valve that closes off the tank to the city supply. City water is directly connected to the cold water system through a copper water pipe that runs across the ceiling to the driver's side. Wastewater is held in a 32-gallon plastic holding tank until it can be dumped. The fresh water system is laid out so that all but 2 or 3 of the fittings are visible, depending on the model. You can easily reach the fittings at the water tank and pump, at the toilet, at the bathroom basin and water heater, and at the kitchen sink. You can get to another fitting by reaching behind the wall panel in the bathroom. The final freshwater system connection is in the ceiling. You can get to it in both sized models by unscrewing and taking off the ceiling panel in the hallway outside the bathroom. There is one line in the 23-foot motorhome, 2 in the 26-foot unit. 5 drain cocks located near fittings are also part of the plumbing system. There will be a 6th if the motorhome is equipped with an electric recirculating toilet. All the drain cocks must be opened to completely drain the living area water system. The plumbing system contains 3 types of fittings: flared, compression, and sweat fittings. Each is repaired differently in the event of a leak. You should be able to correct a leak at a flared fitting by tightening the nuts. But if you can't, disassemble the fitting and check it for a crack or distortion. You'll have to connect a new fitting if the original one is damaged. If there is a leak at a compression fitting, it is likely that the fitting is defective, in which case you should install a new fitting. A sweat fitting is soldered together. Because it should be disassembled to correct a leak, you'll have to heat the connection with a propane torch. Clean the fitting to remove the old solder and then put it back together again. If a leak should occur at a plumbing fixture, disassemble the fixture and replace the defective part. To prevent leaks caused by water pipes that froze during the winter, it is essential that the motorhome be properly winterized by draining all of the water from the water system. If the system is not properly drained, one of the most frequent locations where freezing occurs is in the toilet. It has many plastic parts that could crack easily from freezing. Therefore, when a vehicle is winterized, step on the standard toilet pedal 20 to 30 seconds to get out all the water. Keep the pedal depressed until no water enters the toilet bowl. If the motorhome is equipped with the electric recirculating toilet, make sure it is completely evacuated. The freshwater system in the GMC Motorhome is a demand pressure system. The water pump is located next to the water storage tank. With the demand pump, the water in the tank is not pressurized. Instead, the pump has a pressure switch with a diaphragm that senses pressure on both the inlet and outlet of the pump. When a faucet is opened, the pressure lowers and the pump turns on. When the faucet is closed, pressure is built up in the lines until the shutoff pressure is attained and the pump shuts off. Pressurized water exists only in the water lines from the outlet side of the pump diaphragm to the extremities of the plumbing. In other words, when you open a faucet, you demand water and pressure, and the pump turns on. When draining the water system for winterization, don't neglect the pump, or freezing could cause a broken casting. After running the pump to pump the water lines dry, turn it off and disconnect the outlet connection. Then start the pump and allow it to run until all water is expelled. Running the pump while dry will not harm it. It is recommended that the connection not be reconnected until warm weather, unless the system is completely void of water. Occasionally, though, you may encounter a problem with a water pump. We're going to discuss 4 possible service situations: a pump that doesn't prime, a system which loses pressure, causing the pump to run when not demanded, a rough or noisy pump, or even one that doesn't run at all. If the problem is that the pump doesn't prime, check the level of the fresh water tank, check the pump and system for leaks, and be sure all valves and faucets are open. Check the voltage at the pump's electrical leads. The pump requires 12 volts. If the voltage is low, check the living area battery and recharge it if necessary. If none of your checks to this point has determined the cause for the pump's not priming, the most likely remaining reason is foreign material between the intake or discharge valve and valve seat. To dismantle the unit and check it, drain the water tank at its drain valve. Turn off the pump and bleed the pressure through a faucet. Disconnect both hoses and remove the 4 tie-down screws. You will then be able to lift out the pump. Lift the valve assemblies from their pockets and clean all foreign material from the valves and their seats. When you replace the assemblies, be sure that the rubber valve with the small hole is up on the intake and the rubber valve without the small hole is down on the discharge. Take care that you do not use a valve with a small hole in the rubber discharge side of the pump. Also, because the diameter of the hole is critical to the pump's proper operation, it must not be enlarged. If a customer complains that his motorhome is losing water pressure and that the water pump is running when water is not being drawn, you should trouble diagnose the problem in essentially the same manner as for a pump that doesn't prime. Check the pump, faucets, and all connections for leaks, and inspect the valves for foreign material. Different factors, though, would cause a pump to run roughly or have excessive noise. When you have to service a noisy pump, inspect the plumbing, especially the inlet hose, to make sure there are no restrictions. Remove the aerators from faucets to clean them of any dirt that could cause a restriction. Check the water lines to see that none are hitting anything and amplifying what would be normal pump vibration. If you have not solved the noise problem after these checks, you'll have to take the pump out of the vehicle to inspect the pulsation dampener for ruptures or loss of air. Take off the bottom plate to remove the dampener. Check it for ruptures. When you replace the dampener and reassemble the pump, make sure the flange of the dampener is correctly seated so that no water or air leakage can occur. To avoid damaging the dampener and to obtain the proper compression on the dampener flange, tighten the screws evenly until the flange of the bottom plate is flush with the bottom of the base casting. If the pump does not run at all, there are several things you should check. Make sure the fuse is not blown out. Make sure the living area battery has enough voltage. And make sure 12 volts is reaching the pressure switch on the pump. If all of the electrical checks prove positive, the pump motor is probably defective. Remove the pump from the motorhome and install a new motor. To verify that the motor is defective and that there is nothing wrong with the wiring within the pump, you may want to connect 12 volts directly to the old motor to see if it runs before installing a new one. If the motor runs, replace the pressure switch. The water heater operates off 120 volts AC. It has its own drain cock, which must be opened when draining the water system. The heater is set at the factory at 150 degrees. Early production water heaters are equipped with an adjustable thermostat, while more recently produced units are non-adjustable. When a heater isn't heating adequately, the first thing you should check is this setting to make sure it is set high enough. To check or adjust the setting, you must take off the access cover. Next, check the circuit breaker in the electrical compartment to make sure the circuit hasn't opened. Check the thermostat. Again, you must remove the access cover. Connect a probe to the electrical lead going to the heater. If 120 volts is not going to the heater, the thermostat is defective. To remove it and put in a new one, take off the nuts that hold the thermostat cover plate in place, disconnect the electrical leads, and pull out the thermostat. If, however, 120 volts is going to the heater, but water is not getting hot, the heating element is defective, probably burned out. Incidentally, the most likely reason for a burned out element is operating the water heater without water in the tank. So if you ever have the opportunity, you may mention to motorhome owners that water must be in the heater before it is turned on, otherwise the element will burn out. Before you start to replace the heating element, drain any water from the water heater tank. The element is replaced by disconnecting the electrical leads and removing the screws that hold it in place. At some time or other, you will probably have to service both types of toilets available for the motor home, the standard model and the optional electric recirculating model. The standard mechanical model flushes with a minimum of fresh water in a swirling action in a manner somewhat similar to a home toilet. But it differs from a home toilet in two important ways. Because there is no storage reservoir for flushing, it is directly hooked to the fresh water line. It has no water trap built into the bowl, but uses a mechanically operated valve. This toilet requires no routine maintenance. If the flush valve assembly does not operate freely after extended use, or the foot pedal becomes hard to operate, it may be restored to its original operating condition by applying a light film of silicone spray to the blade. For servicing the toilet, it disassembles into 4 subassemblies: the seat and cover, the vacuum breaker, the flush valve assembly, and the toilet housing. There are 3 main service problems that you may encounter: holding tank odor seeping into the bathroom, water keeps running into the bowl, or the toilet leaks. The first 2 problems are usually related, since they are caused by the same situation and are corrected by the same method. If the blade in the bottom of the bowl does not close completely, holding tank odors escape through the seal. The open seal also keeps the water control valve partially open, which in turn keeps the water running. If the blade is not closing, it is probably because the groove into which it seats when completely closed is clogged with foreign material. The solution or repair is simple. Insert the end of a coat hanger or similar object into the sealing groove and remove the foreign material. Avoid damaging the rubber seal while cleaning. We mentioned previously that freezing could cause the plastic components of the toilet to crack and result in leaks. Besides cracks in the plastic, leaks can appear at a few other places: the vacuum breaker, the water control valve, the bowl to flush valve assembly seal, and the flush valve flange seal. If the vacuum breaker leaks when the toilet is flushed, you'll have to install a new one. To remove the vacuum breaker and any other toilet component, the toilet has to be taken out of the motorhome. First, though, turn off the water pump switch to shut off the water. You also have to disconnect the water line connection at the rear left side of the toilet. 2 3-inch bolts with a 1/2-inch nut hold the toilet in place, one in the front behind the pedals and one at the back. To reach the front bolt, the pedals must be held down. The pedals are part of the flush valve assembly and are connected to the blade. To hold down the pedals, depress the pedals and insert an object such as a block of wood into the outlet located at the bottom of the bowl. Release the pedals slowly until the blade touches and holds the object. The object will hold the pedal down and provide access to the front closet bolt nut. One word of caution: be sure the object is large enough so that it can't slip through the hole into the holding tank. With the front bolt nut now accessible, you can remove it. Access to the rear nut is obtained by removing the access plug in the bowl. Just press down on the plug's edge closest to the bowl. To reach the nut, you'll need a 12-inch extension, a universal, and a 1/2-inch deep well socket. You may want to secure the socket with tape and put a small amount of sealer in the socket to lift out the nut. To remove the vacuum breaker, first remove the toilet from the motorhome and place it on a bench. Then remove the seat and cover. Turn the toilet upside down. Remove the water lines from the vacuum breaker. Remove the 2 screws from the hinge post lugs. Flex the lugs inward and move the vacuum breaker approximately 1/2 inch toward the rear of the toilet. Now you can lift the vacuum breaker out of the toilet. Reverse the procedure to install a new one. If the leak is at the bowl to flush valve assembly seal, you should remove the flush valve assembly and apply a new silicone seal. To do this, again, remove the toilet from the bathroom and turn it upside down on your bench. Take out the 6 screws that are now visible and lift off the flush valve assembly. Peel off the old silicone sealer and apply fresh silicone to make a new seal. Then reinstall the flush valve assembly to the toilet. As mentioned before, there could be a leak at the water control valve. A leaking water control valve is indicated by a leak at the vacuum breaker when the toilet is not operating. The only way to correct the leak is to install a new valve. Since the valve is part of the flush valve assembly, you'll have to remove the flush valve assembly to reach it. The fourth place where you might find a leak is at the flush valve flange area. To correct a leak there, check the front and rear closet flange nuts for tightness. If the leak persists, remove the toilet and check the closet flange height. Lay a straight edge across the flange and measure the gap between the straight edge and the floor at 4 different points. The height should be between 1/4 and 7/16 of an inch above the floor. Adjust the closet flange height to meet the specifications and replace the closet flange seal. The optional electric recirculating toilet available for the GMC Motorhome is filled with fresh water and a chemical. A high-speed pump recirculates the contents of the base through the bowl in a swirling flushing action. The chemical is added to control odors, as there is no seal between the bowl and the contents of the toilet. This toilet does require routine maintenance. It must be filled with water, the chemical must be added periodically, and it must be emptied when it becomes full. We're going to cover 5 service problems related to the electric recirculating toilet. A toilet that does not cycle properly, one with a flushing action that is weak or noisy, a toilet that cycles when the seat is raised, one that wobbles, and one that seems to lack recirculating capacity. If the toilet is not cycling properly, the problem is most likely in the electrical connections or source. Remove the 2 motor cover screws and lift off the cover so that you can check the wiring polarity. Make sure the black positive lead wire is connected to the black line on the timer assembly, the white negative lead wire to the white one on the assembly. Check the lead wires for voltage. If 12 volts DC is not reaching the timer assembly, check the living area battery voltage. If it is low, recharge it. If the wiring and power source are not the reason for improper cycling, you'll have to replace the timer assembly. At this point, the lead wires are already disconnected and the cover removed. To complete disassembling the timer, disconnect the leads from the pump assembly motor, remove the 2 timer bracket mounting screws, and then lift up the timer assembly. If a customer complains that the flushing action of his toilet is weak or noisy, one of 3 things could be the cause. The pump could be running backwards because the wiring polarity is reversed. Take off the motor cover and inspect the pump electrical leads. Cycling the unit without enough charge water could also make the toilet flushing action weak or noisy, so check the level indicator on the toilet. Or the pump could be damaged and need replacing. Before you start to remove the pump, completely evacuate the unit by pulling the dump valve handle. Then, as you did to remove the timer, take off the motor cover and disconnect the wiring at the power source and at the pump assembly. Disconnect the water line. Remove the cover and bowl assembly by removing the 2 screws in the rear from the top side. Remove the 4 pump mounting screws. Disconnect the flush tube from the pump outlet. And detach the pump assembly. If the toilet cycles when the seat cover is raised, it's because the actuator button protrudes too far from the motor cover. To work the button back further into the housing, alternately press one side of the button, then the other. If the button still protrudes too far, replace the timer assembly according to the procedures we previously covered. Whenever you have to adjust a wobbly toilet, first tighten the closet bolt nuts which are on the flange behind the dump valve handle. The nuts may not have been tight enough, or the mounting brackets may not have been seated to the floor. If the toilet continues to wobble, either the closet flange is too high or the mounting surface is uneven. For both situations, measure the flange height the same way as for the standard toilet. There's one final problem to cover. Lack of capacity. That is, the toilet doesn't produce the minimum number of flushes it should before it fills and needs evacuating. Probably the toilet was initially filled beyond the 3-gallon charge level. If a motorhome owner tells you his toilet needs to be emptied too often, explain to him that the toilet should be filled only to the 3-gallon level, and that if it's filled beyond that point, there will be fewer flushes available before it needs refilling. Here you see a schematic of the motorhome's drainage system. All of the lines are ABS plastic pipes, which can be repaired with unions or fittings and plastic pipe cement. Some motorhomes may be equipped with an optional wastewater system component, the Thermosan system, which destroys the waste liquid in the holding tank. It uses the superheat energy from the engine's exhaust to disintegrate holding tank wastes into a harmless, invisible exhaust emission. The system follows a relatively simple operation. When the control is turned to on while the vehicle is traveling, the green ready light will glow, indicating the system is ready. When the speed sensor detects a speed of at least 35 miles per hour, and the heat sensor detects adequate engine exhaust temperature, the metering injection pump is actuated and draws waste liquid from the holding tank. At this point, the red reaction light comes on to indicate that waste liquid is going through the lines. The waste liquid passes through the evacuation probe, which prevents solids from entering the lines. The SAN ejector then injects waste liquids into the hot engine exhaust stream, where the waste is dispersed, converted to a gas, and removed as an exhaust emission. Most of the Thermosan problems you may have to solve will probably occur because the owner did not understand or was not informed of certain characteristics of Thermosan. So, advise him to use only water-soluble tissue to avoid clogging the evacuation probe. Inform him that the white empty light will probably flicker when the tank is near empty level. Agitation from vehicle movement will cause the holding tank level to slosh above and below the level indicator, causing the flickering. The system is designed so that when the control indicates empty, there will still be about 2 inches of liquid waste remaining in the holding tank. Therefore, if a motorhome is equipped with the optional monitor panel, the owner should not be alarmed if his Thermosan control indicates empty, but the monitor panel registers some contents in the holding tank. Thermosan will not completely empty the tank. Another easily solved complaint you may hear is that the ready light flickers. Probably the motorhome's driver is not applying even pressure to the accelerator pedal. The system is designed to stop operating when the foot is removed from the accelerator. So if the foot pressure is jerky, the light will flicker and the system will not be able to start pumping. Let's cover some Thermosan problems now that do indicate malfunctioning components. The empty light remains on or off. The reaction light goes out too late or comes on too soon. The pump does not run, and the holding tank level does not go down. If the white empty light remains on or off all the time, it indicates that the level indicator is defective and needs replacing. The level indicator module is connected to the evacuation probe and affixed to the evacuation probe hose. With a properly operating system, the reaction light should go off 2 to 3 seconds after the foot is removed from the accelerator and before the vehicle decelerates to 35 miles per hour. If, when decelerating, the light does not go off when it should, the heat sensor, which in actuality measures engine vacuum, is malfunctioning. the heat sensor is mounted to the vehicle firewall near the crankcase ventilation hose. If the opposite conditions occur, that is, if the reaction light goes on when accelerating before reaching 35 miles per hour, the speed sensor has failed in the closed position. For replacement, you'll find the speed sensor attached to the transmission at the speedometer cable. The lights on the control module will also indicate whether the pump is operating. When the reaction light is on, the speed and vacuum requirements for the pump to run are met. To check whether the pump has turned on, pull out the on-off switch. The red reaction light and green ready light should blink if the pump is injecting waste. If the pump isn't running, the first thing you should check is the 5-amp fuse. If the fuse were blown, there wouldn't be any lights on the control at all. Then, check the electrical lead connections at the pump and be sure 12 volts is getting to it. If there's nothing wrong with the electrical source, the pump will have to be replaced. It is mounted to the frame with two 3/8 by 1-inch bolts. If a motorhome owner reports that the holding tank level does not go down, even though the controls indicate that the thermostat's speed and heat requirements are met and indicate that the pump is running, the system's evacuation probe is probably clogged. Since the probe is positioned inside the holding tank, be sure to drain, rinse, and deodorize the tank before removing the probe. Also, since the probe is an expansion fitting, be careful when you pull it out. To clean the probe, just wash the screen with a hose. For complete water system details, consult your GMC Motorhome Maintenance Manual.